Look, if your neighbor is doing something on his land that is adversely affecting you, actually harming you, for instance, if he is generating sewage which is flowing onto your property, or if he is taking his dog's poop and putting it over your fence, or even if he is burning wood in his stove and all of that smoke is going right into your house, you have the right to go to your neighbor and ask him to stop hurting your life, even if it is just your quality of life. You do have the right to do that. I don't think you have the right to force your neighbor to do what you're asking him to do. If he does not respond, you can take the next step, which would be to get some of your friends to go over and exert more pressure on that person. What I think what a lot of people miss is that when you're dealing with neighbors, it ought to be like dealing with friends, where you're trying to reach a mutually beneficial relationship of living close together. It doesn't make sense to be polluting your neighbor's yard. It doesn't make sense to be hurting your neighbor's health. It doesn't make sense to cause harm in any way, shape, or form, even if that harm is simply the comfort of your neighbor. That's talking about noise. It's talking about garbage. It's talking about even the appearance of your house. I don't think we need laws for these things. We don't need ordinances to force people to get along with each other. If you're having a hard time getting along with your neighbor because your neighbor's being a jerk, there are other things that you can do to exert pressure on that person to encourage him to or her to change their behavior. You don't have to resort to violence, and that's really what calling the authorities is. It's a form of violence, because no matter what ordinance we're talking about, whether it's a noise ordinance, they're making noise after 10 p.m., I'm going to call the cops on them. Every time you invite a person into the situation who has not only the power, as in terms of having an actual gun, but also the authority from the rest of the society to kill. Basically, what you're saying is that it is worth this other person dying over the fact that they're bothering you right now. If you call the police, you're saying that it's okay with you if somebody dies. To me, this has bigger implications. It's not simply about people living next to people. It's also about property rights. And if you look at what's going on right now in Canada with the ruling from the court, the protests from an Inupiat village, which, by the way, there are Inupiats in Alaska as well as in Canada, protesting the oil and gas exploration, and the court stepping in and saying, nope, you are not going to allow these companies to do this exploration anymore. One of the biggest issues is whose land are they trying to drill on? Because in most cases, this is considered government land, which I don't think should exist in the first place. The idea that somehow a non-entity, a myth created in the minds of other people, I don't own it, you don't own it, we own it. Well, who controls it? Whoever's in power. Okay, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't really belong to anyone. You've got this land out there that, in order to explore on it, you have to have special permission, which means you pay the right amount of money to go out there and explore it. It seems to me like if you have done everything right and you've got the permits, you ought to be allowed to explore. Now, the fact that these neighbors are coming in and saying, no, I don't think they ought to be able to do that. Well, have they actually hurt anyone else? No, they might. They might hurt someone else. This is like saying we're not going to permit our neighbors to bring in a stereo into their home because they might play it too loud. I'm not going to permit my neighbor to have a pet dog because he might poop and have that poop thrown over into my yard. I'm not going to permit my neighbors to have a wood stove because he might generate smoke that might come into my house. If actual harm is done, you can pursue recompense after the fact. Preventing people from activities because they might do something is absolutely insane. That's my 2 cents. I'd love to engage you on this or any other topic. You can either give me a phone call, 907-458-0495, or send me an email, steve@radiofreespeech.com. Let's talk.